So again, thank you for joining the PPP Loan Forgiveness webinar. We'll be going over important updates as far as the Flexibility Act and just going over bits of the application. For a legal disclaimer, the information presented today is provided for educational purposes and should not be considered legal advice. Our co-host is Hiromi. Hiromi is part of professional tax planning. Hiromi's parents were immigrants from Japan and the Philippines. Her parents owned Hiromi's Oriental Restaurant in Chicago is where she was born and raised. In 2010, she became an auditor for CPA firms. And in 2016 to the present, she shifted her specialty, which includes tax return preparation, Intuit TurboTax On-Demand CPA, internal auditor for construction companies, and she freelances as a CPA consultant. We are also joined by Efrat from Corporate Payroll Services. Efrat has a bachelor's in international business. She joined Corporate Payroll Services in 1999 and has held a variety of roles in operations, management, and information technology. I will be going ahead and passing this over to Hiromi now so we can begin, and this way we'll have a lot more time for questions at the end. Hiromi, if you would like, you can turn on your camera so that you can be seen if you would like. I'm going to go ahead and give you control, and once you accept that, you can go ahead and begin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you all are here, and thank you to Corporate Payroll for inviting me. I hear a lot of questions, similar questions from everyone, and I feel that customers are really, I guess, nervous about the PPP forgiveness. And good news, the rules have changed. The rules have changed for PPP, and I'm very excited to share that. And without further ado, I will see if I can control this slide here. Just a sec. There is a little bit of a lag, so just give me a minute. Okay, there we go. The original rules for PPP forgiveness, as a lot of you might know, and hold on. Okay. Is that the forgiveness is 8 weeks, right? And I built this little visual since I work with a lot of non-English speakers. I don't speak another language, but what I try to do is I try to explain accounting and financial using visuals. And this is one of the things that I do. And here are 8 weeks. And the original rule is that you have 8 weeks to receive the money and then spend the money, and whatever you don't spend, you would return that in a loan with a 1% APR, which is not that bad. You know, that's a really good deal. 1% APR in a 2-year loan term, and the first 6 months, minimum payments are deferred, okay? And of course, just to make things a little bit more exciting, the PPP program, so PPP Flexibility Act was passed in early June, and now everyone's even more confused as to what rules have changed, and I want to go over that with you so that way it makes more sense when it comes to the PPP forgiveness. And I know that in the last webinar we went over the old rules, and now here are the updates. Okay. Oh, and a little bit of a housekeeping. If you have questions, go ahead and put that in the chat box. If we have some time at the end, I will go over some answers and responses if I know the answer to them. If not, then it's going to be one of those things where I have to jot down for later, and I'll call the SBA for. Okay. So here are the new rules. Instead of 8 weeks, we have to multiply that by 3 times. You now have 24 weeks. All right, you have 24 weeks to spend that money that you receive for the PPP loan and ask for forgiveness, you know, after the 24th week period. And of course, you're going to have to gather your documents and information during the 24-week period. And I did receive questions about, well, since the PPP forgiveness covered period has extended from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, can I go back to my lender and ask for more money? There were no revisions to that. So whatever you've received for the PPP loan is what you will use to spend, okay? And so the original bill said that you'll get 10 weeks worth of the wages of the payroll. So that's 2.5 months. So either 10 weeks or 2.5 months of the PPP money. And then you'll have 24 weeks to spend that money, okay? So there's no revision about increasing the PPP or anything like that. And of course, the rules might change again. Okay, so you receive the money on the first week, and then the forgiveness clock ends at the end of the week 24. Okay, that's a really long time, you know. And not only that, if you haven't figured out how to spend the PPP money with paying off the allowable expenses, then you're going to have to return that money in a 1% APR, same as the old rules. And the thing that they've changed is that instead of 2-year, it is a 5-year loan, and the first 10 months minimum payments are forgiven. So the law, Congress is trying to make this much easier to spend all of your PPP funds and to request forgiveness. All right. So here's my chart again from last time. This is the example. Let's say the covered period is, let me further just clarify the covered period. When you receive the loan on May 5th, 24 weeks later, that means the forgiveness clock ends on October 20th. You do have an alternative payroll covered period. And what that means is that the first payday, you know, the first payday of the following pay period after the loan money was received, then let's say, for example, the first payday is on a Monday, the following Monday, which is May 11th, 24 weeks is shifted. Your last day is October 26th. Okay, so sometime in October, that's a really long time. You know, May through October, I really hope that you could have some more time to spend that money, especially if you're a restaurant and that you can't open yet and you're shut down at the moment, or your business is just shut down and you can't pay these employees or you can't hire employees during that time period because of the pandemic. And so this is just to give you some more time to spend that PPP fund. And if your deadline, I know if you don't have the PPP fund yet, which almost everyone on the call already have your PPP funds, or you've been approved and you're waiting for the PPP fund. Well, if your forgiveness clock extends up to December 31st, the last date of forgiveness will be December 31st, 2020. All right. And I was invited back here because we wanted to go over the PPP forgiveness application. And just a disclaimer, this is the application using the old rules, and I would expect that the instructions would be updated by the SBA and uploaded to the Treasury Department website, which is www.treasury.gov. There's a red banner at the top, and you would click on that, and then you can apply for the forgiveness because the application will be there. Okay. On the first page, it allows you to select your payroll schedule. Okay, that's either weekly, bi-weekly, twice a month, or monthly. And if you're self-employed, you just go ahead and select one of these however many times you want to pay yourself if you're self-employed. Other than that, then you can use a payroll provider just like corporate payroll, and I assume everyone here is using corporate payroll, and we're building something really, really cool. Corporate payroll will help you fill out this application using their program that they have, and we'll mention more about that later. But so far, if you're a do-it-yourself type of person, DIY, then this application is on the treasury.gov website, and you can clearly see what is on there. And I just want to point out really important things to notice on the application. It can be very confusing. I did have the question of, did the application ask which covered period that you would select? And yes, it's right there. You would select one of these and fill out the dates if applicable. Okay. Allowable expenses. Now, how do you get 100% forgiveness? The rules have changed for this one as well. Now you have to spend 60% of your PPP fund on payroll. And this is a cliff. If you spend less than 60% of your PPP fund on payroll, then you get 0% forgiveness. You have to spend 60% or more of your PPP fund on payroll costs, all right? That could be 60%, that could be 70%, or that could be 100%. It just has to be 60% or more to get at least 60% of the PPP fund forgiven. The remaining 40% or less can be spent on business utilities, business rent, and mortgage interest. All right. And that also includes business use of home, but we will discuss about what utilities, what rent, and what mortgage interest is allowed in a later slide. Otherwise, if you don't spend all the PPP funds, you will have to return the money using that 1% APR loan with a 5-year term with the first 10 months with minimum payments deferred, okay? So 60% is used on payroll. The remaining is used on the allowable expenses of utilities, rent, and mortgage interest, and then you'll get 100% forgiveness. Okay. Now, earlier in the old presentation, I mentioned that every employee has a cap of $100,000 salary, and that includes owners. And I had said that if you take, and before it was 8 weeks, remember? So if you take $100,000, now it's 24 weeks, I would assume that it would be $100,000 divided by 24 weeks. And that would be your weekly pay. Multiply that by 24 weeks. That would be your maximum payout to that employee during the 24 weeks. And then if you're an owner, if you receive more than one PPP fund for your multiple businesses, then just to let you know, that cap is across all of your businesses, okay? So just make sure that you're very careful about that and you're not paying yourself $100,000 salary for each of your businesses, okay? Per person, have a cap of $100,000 salary, divide that by 52, 24 weeks of that is considered the cap used for this covered period. Okay, does that make sense? If not, go ahead and put your question in the chat, and I will take a look and see if we can answer that afterwards. Okay. If you receive your EIDL money, remember there are 2 parts, and the EIDL stands for Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This is different from the PPP. This is a totally separate thing. It has different application. The rules are different. It's a little bit more restricted based on the terms and conditions. Of course, PPP has restrictions, and so do EIDL. Okay. We had a lot of questions on what is the EIDL, what can you use it for, and the reason why, and I'll explain why I need to explain EIDL and why it's very important. I put the EIDL hand in here for a reason. So give me a minute to explain EIDL first for those who don't know what that is. That is when you had applied on the SBA website, which you can now apply for the EIDL. If you haven't applied for this yet, the application has reopened on the SBA.gov website. Go ahead, and if you missed the first time, if you missed your first chance of getting this money, you can go ahead and apply starting yesterday. Okay, EIDL is only used for ordinary necessary expenses to keep your business running at its current state. So that means EIDL can be used to pay taxes, rent, materials, supplies, anything for your business to keep it open. All right, rent or anything like that, even if it's shut down, but you technically want to keep your business alive for as long as possible, and that's what the EIDL is for. The EIDL is not to refinance your loans, your credit cards, or your other debt, and it's not meant to buy a new car, and it's not meant to buy a new boat, and it's not meant to buy new appliances or property. We keep getting a lot of questions. Can I use this EIDL money to invest in new real estate or to invest in a car so you could do Uber or Lyft or whatever? The answer is no. This is only meant for working capital only. And and the reason why I mentioned about the EIDL, because even if it's separate from the PPP, is because the Congress said that they don't like double dipping. If you receive the EIDL advance, which is the gift basically of $1,000 per employee that you have up to $10,000. And so if you receive this EIDL advance, which is a tax-free income, a tax-exempt income, they will take a portion of your forgiveness of your PPP funds. So let's say they put a magic carpet for you, you take the advance, they pull the magic carpet away from you because they're going to reduce your PPP fund one way or another. Let's say, for example, you were allowed to receive PPP loan of $80,000, and you figured out a way to get $50,000 forgiven, and you receive EIDL advance of $7,000. Well, reduce that forgiven PPP down to $43,000. So either they reduced it when you first applied for the PPP, or they reduced it at the end when you're applying for the PPP forgiveness. What does the application look like for that? All I can see, which I'm going to give you an example here, all you can see is that the PPP forgiveness asks for the EIDL advance amount on the first page here, and they ask for your confirmation number here. There is nowhere on the application that states if the PPP forgiveness had already reduced your PPP loan at the time when you applied. That's something that needs to be discussed with the lender. Keep your documentation for that, because I didn't see it anywhere on here if they've already reduced your PPP loan when you first applied for the PPP. Now, if they haven't reduced your PPP loan when you first applied, then go ahead and enter these numbers, and surely they're going to reduce your PPP forgiveness here. If you are self-employed, if you have a Schedule C, or you're in a partnership, the question comes then, I don't give myself a W-2. How do I apply my weekly payroll? How do I apply my payroll so that way I can pay myself the PPP fund? What's gonna happen is that we will take your 2019 net profit, divide that by 52 weeks, and that would be your weekly pay. So really get your 2019 tax return done. It's due on July 15th, and I know it's a month away, but get that done as quick as you can. So that way you can calculate this, and here's an example. If you have a $78,000 net profit for the 2019 year, divide that by 52 weeks, and that means your payroll, your weekly payroll is $1,500. All right. So I have houses here to kind of visualize who would use this formula. Not everyone uses this formula. If you're self-employed, if you have an LLC as a disregarded entity, then take your Schedule C and look for line 31, and this is for the sole proprietors. You would use this calculation. If you have a partnership, then look at your K1 and find the net profit, and then you would use this calculation. Okay. If you have a corporation, And not everyone knows what a corporation is. So here's here's basically my general gist of a corporation. If you are a C corporation, meaning you have Inc. at the end of your company name, INC Incorporated, then you are a corporation. Do not use this formula. Do not use this formula. Use the corporate payroll reports that we're going to discuss at the end of this presentation. But use the payroll reports, use third-party reports, and use your W-2, use your the 941s. That's what you're going to need to use. If you're an S corporation, you do not use this formula. You use the corporate payroll reports. If you are a tax-exempt corporation, meaning you're a nonprofit organization or nonprofit corporation, you need to be using the corporate payroll reports for this, and do not use this formula. So the orange house, use this formula. The yellow apartment building, use this formula. The blue building here, do not use this formula. Okay, I hope that makes it very clear. And I just want to remind everybody that if you have a corporation and you're saying things like, but I don't pay myself a W-2 wage, I only pay out distributions to myself. Well, technically, if you look at the IRS website, you should have been paying yourself a W-2 wage. It's something that your tax professional should have warned you about when you opened your C Corp, your S Corp, or your tax-exempt corporation. You should be paying yourself a W-2 wage, even if if you're saying things like, I don't have any employees. You have at least one, which is yourself. And there is a rule here that corporations must report an appropriate and reasonable salary, and I have reasons for that. You could always ask me why that would be the case, but either way, just remember that if you're a corporation and you're reporting $0 in W-2 wages, that's a no-no. That's something that should have been discussed when you first opened your entity. And now if you are nervous about that, don't worry, we got solutions for you. We could talk about that on a separate call. The most common questions is then who are my employees? Of course, your employees are your W-2 employees. Okay, and the reason why the government is saying that W-2 employees, you get to use PPP funds to pay W-2 employees, is because the government is trying to prevent the same people to get unemployment benefit. Okay, it's called Paycheck Protection Program, to protect the paychecks of the W-2 employees, to keep them on your payroll, right? It would defeat the purpose of this program if the same people are also asking for unemployment benefits. That would be very, very weird, to get double benefit out of that. If you are an owner and you're self-employed or a partnership, of course, then the question comes, I don't pay myself a W-2. Am I an employee? Yes, you are. You count as an employee. Why? Because you pay self-employment taxes. That self-employment taxes is essentially payroll taxes. So yes, you count as well. Okay. And 1099 employees, who are they? Well, Congress is saying they don't like double dipping, all right? No double dipping. And if you have an independent contractor or freelancer or however you want to call them, if you're giving them a 1099 or you're paying them an invoice rather than a W-2, they have their own business. They can get their own PPP fund. Use your PPP fund on W-2 employees and yourself, but you do not pay out from your PPP fund to pay 1099 because they can get that money themselves, getting their own PPP fund. So no double dipping there is the general rule. Okay. If you're hiring employees, let's say you have way more employees when you first applied for the PPP application, for the PPP loan. If you're letting people go, you furloughed them, you fired them, or whatever the reason is, if your head count is less when you're applying for the PPP forgiveness, you could potentially reduce your PPP forgiveness amount. And if you're reducing the salary of these employees, reducing their hours, if you reduce their hours by 25% or more, or if you're reducing their salary or their wages by 25% or more, well, 25%, or I think now it's 40%. So if you're reducing, you know, the formula there is really complicated. If you're reducing the salary, wages, and the headcount by a certain percentage, it will start reducing your PPP forgiveness. If you can't reopen your business, or if an employer rejects your offer to rehire them because they prefer unemployment benefit, or if you have a disruptive employee and you just have to let them go, just make sure you have good documentation for it, and then you won't get dinged for that. So I just put on here, refusal to return to work, you get no ding. Disruptive employee, no problem. You cannot rehire, just have good documentation. So just have good written documentation, either by email, a letter, something they sign, anything like that, or I don't know, news articles of the economy or your sales going down significantly, anything like that. I don't know what the documentation is for it, just because it's not very clear in the law. Just know that there is a way to get out of that. Okay, so here's the PPP forgiveness application, and clearly it lays out employees at the time of loan application, how many employees that you have there, and how many employees that you have at the time of forgiveness. Okay. Here is an excerpt from the Congress website, you know, and I don't want to read this whole thing. You can read that in your own spare time. Just Google Congress bill and you'll find it. The link is right there. You know, screenshot this if you want to read the bill yourself. It's only a couple pages. And what's the important thing to note is, you know, option B here, where it says is able to document an inability to return to the same level of business activity. It is an excerpt saying that you have an excuse, that you could not rehire your employees. It does not specifically say what documents are required for that. All it says is that you have an excuse, and please keep, you know, your documentation in order for that. I hope that's really helpful for you guys. I really hope that, you know, an excerpt from the bill was helpful, and I hope that makes sense too. Okay, payroll costs. We had a lot of questions about this. Well, from my understanding and the whole general gist of this is that in general, the number that's in the employee's pay stub, the gross pay, is what you use as the payroll cost, you know, the majority of it. The W-2 wage gross payroll, and that would already include the employee's contribution to the employee taxes, on payroll taxes, their income taxes and all that, and their contribution to the retirement fund, their contribution on their health benefits, and all of those things. So the gross pay on their pay stub is of course included, right? And outside of that, if you're the employer and you are paying for additional employee benefits, such as their portion of their health coverage, then you can add that as well outside of the gross payroll. Just make sure you're just not double counting, right? And of course, number 3, as I mentioned it before, there's a $100,000 salary cap per employee, and that includes the owner employee. And of course, employees have to be living and working in the United States. And number 5, employer's portion of the state Department of Labor taxes, you know, the unemployment portion of it that employees don't realize that you're paying on their behalf, you may add that as well, right? State and local taxes for that. What you cannot add, and the PPP was the SBA specifically laid out, is that not the one that you can't add to your payroll costs is the employer portion of FICA. So that's federal Social Security and the federal Medicare. So the employer portion of that, you cannot add that. Okay, hope that makes sense. For sole proprietors and partnerships, what are your payroll costs? It's simple. Get your 2019 tax return, get the net profit from either your Schedule C or your K-1, and that is what you're going to use to calculate your salary. That formula earlier that I mentioned, it's that formula. Okay. All right. Let's get to the application. And it gets really confusing. It was written as if some type of IRS person wrote it out. And my biggest advice is to fill this out backwards. You know, if you're a DIY type of person, you know, if you like to do things by yourself because you have all the time in the world right now since it's the pandemic, well, fill it out backwards. And I'm going to fill this out from the bottom to the top. The last page is the PPP borrow demographic information form. It's not important. It's optional. It's not really necessary. You don't have to fill it out, but go ahead if you so choose. Fill out the PPP Schedule A worksheet first, okay? And we'll go over a few pieces in there that's really important. And next, fill out the PPP Schedule A next, because it's pulling numbers from the worksheet. And let me tell you, corporate payroll is coming up with this really awesome report that pretty much replicates these pieces here. And then the last piece you're going to fill out is the actual application, the PPP Loan Forgiveness Calculation form, which is going to pull numbers from Schedule A. So fill it out backwards, and then everything is going to be nice and dandy. Okay. So the PPP Schedule A worksheet, here's an excerpt from that. And I found that even if I am like the expert or whatnot, or so what people want to call me, it is quite confusing. The last two columns is what is really confusing. The first few pages of the application has the instructions that you can follow, and they try to be as clear as they can be. And what I found is that the average FTE is not headcount. It's actually the number of hours worked per employee. And obviously, for those of you who have more than 10 employees or however many lines there is, you're going to have to add an extra spreadsheet. You're going to have to add an extra Excel file with this or something. You put the employee's name line by line here, and then their average number of hours. So how is that calculated? The number of hours divided by 40 hours per week is the number that you're going to put on there, and the highest number then you'll put on there is 1 or 100%, right? The last column here that was also confusing is that you only enter the reduction in wages if you've reduced it by more than 25%, but I would expect that the application would get updated to say greater than 40%, since now that the percentages have changed. But don't take my word for it. We still need to take a look at the new application before we can really decide what number to put on this last column. Another table that's really important is that you list out all the employees that you pay greater than $100,000 in salary. The third column here that says cash compensation, I'm not sure if you put the full amount or just the amount that's above the $100,000. That's not very clear yet. But of course, there are programs out there that helps you fill this out, like corporate payrolls program, worksheet. Okay, and then after when you're done filling out the worksheet, you fill out the page before that is the Schedule A. And of course, I just want to point out that Schedule A will ask you to pull numbers from the worksheet. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory from there, line 1 through line 5. And then line 6, 7, and 8, it's not pulling from the worksheet. It's asking you specific numbers. How much did you spend on contributions for your employee health insurance? That does not include the owner's health insurance. That's only the employee's health insurance. So if you are the owner and you're the only employee, unfortunately, that number will be 0. And that's what I've heard. Correct me if I am wrong. Next is the your contribution to the employee retirement plan. That's for your employees, not if you are an owner. If you're contributing to your retirement plan and you are the owner, I don't think that number is going to get included in here. So just the employee retirement plans, your contribution to their retirement plan, because you're so nice. You know, you're paying your employees retirement. And then this part here is the unemployment piece of it. That's the state DOL and the local taxes. You add that number in there. Okay. All right, next step here is the line 9. It is so confusing. You know, compensation to owner. So what if you are the owner and you're the employee? And we've seen responses to that question. And the answer is yes, you are the employer. You are the owner employee if you're paying yourself a W-2 wage. But the problem is that, you know, it says here may not be included in PPP Schedule A worksheet. This is the most confusing sentence I have ever read, ever. And what I've noticed is that on the next line, line 10, is that they calculate your total payroll costs and they're adding line 1. So if you are paying yourself a W-2 wage, then you would already be included in line 1. Do not include yourself again on line 9. That would be, then that means your math is not going to work out for your payroll costs, right? So just make sure that that is caught. You know, I just don't think that you should put any number in line 9 if you're paying yourself a W-2 wage. But that's just my observation. That's not very clear on that. But when I've read this word for word, this is something that was really odd. Okay. After that, when you're done with Schedule A, go to the main application, right? And very self-explanatory for line 1, you just pull the number from your Schedule A that you worked so hard to fill out. And then after that, you have to just make sure that you fill out the next piece of it, right? Mortgage interest, rent, and utility payments, right? Okay. What is rent and what are utilities? So I lay this out, and I've heard some other corporate payroll services customers saying that they really like this slide, and thank you so much for saying that. And so basically what it is that utilities are electricity, gas, and water. Transportation as in your vehicle, right? The gas for it, and your cell phone and your internet. And then rent is considered not just your apartment rent, but also the equipment lease, and your car lease is included in here, which is very odd because when you think of rent, you think of office rent and you think of apartment rent, but you don't think of a car lease and equipment lease. So there were some fine print on there that includes these things, equipment and car. And this is not laid out anywhere in the rules, but I did call the SBA, and they said that the business use of your home is considered an allowable expense. And what does that mean? Well, if your office is 10 square feet by 10 square feet, your total square feet is 100 square feet for the office at your home. And then if your total home is 1,600 square feet, then calculate the percentage by 100 square feet divided by 1,600, right? So that's your percentage of the business use of the home. You would use that percentage, multiply that by the utilities that you're using for the business, and, you know, kind of figure it out from there. I would think that cell phone is not an absolute necessary device for you for personal. So I like to make the argument that cell phone's 100% and that internet is 100%. The fact that you're using these items for personal is coincidental. I would be okay with putting 100% of your cell phone and 100% of the internet on there, especially if you're in the middle of nowhere, I suppose, and you have all your goats and you're just enjoying the scenery and you don't really care for internet and cell phone. You could, I guess you can make that argument. But so far I've seen everybody using 100% of their cell phone bill and 100% of their internet bill for business. Okay. A mortgage interest, that also includes your car lease interest. So if you have cars under their title has the business on the title, then the interest on that, that's an allowable expense. Just make sure you have your amortization schedule ready for that, or some type of documentation to show the calculation on your interest there. Insurance, liability insurance, and all of that. No, I specifically asked the SBA on this, and that is not considered a utility. That's more like a subscription. So that one, just don't include that as your allowable expense. If you were wondering about the guidance, here's the guidance on the left side, the man in the blue. Click that link, screenshot it or something, but there it is. Okay. I want to make it very clear that when you receive your PPP funds, please create an audit trail. Why? It just makes it easier for your documents on your bank statement and your checks. If anybody asks any verification, it's so easy to create an audit trail for that. So step one, we created 3 steps. Step 1, put your PPP fund in its own bank account and buy paper checks. You know, but digital is okay if you have a memo section. And the diagram on the left side here is to, you know, create a visualization for you. Step 2 is to write a weekly check to yourself, or however long your payroll schedule is like. Then you write payroll from PPP funds. And then step 3, just make sure that you write a check to yourself and you write in the memo what the money is used for: business utilities, business rent, and mortgage interest. Okay, the checklist here. There are 4 things that you need to be, cognizant about. Just make sure that you have your tax return ready to go for 2019, just in case they ask for that, especially if you're self-employed, you will need that. Payroll evidence, of course, you use the corporate payroll reports and all of that, you know, the 941s, the payroll reports, bank statements, your check images, things like that. Non-payroll evidence, get your amortization schedule to show mortgage interest, the check images, your account statements, your agreements that show that the agreement was in place before February 15, 2020, your invoices, your bills, your receipts, you know, get that in order. And then your lender has 10 months after the forgiveness covered period to approve you. So your lender is the gatekeeper. You know, for those people with big banks, I'm really sorry, but you're going to have a hard time talking to your lender. But this is who you're going to need to go to get the forgiveness application approved. You have 10 months, and that means 10 months, that's like next year, October. You have quite a long time to ask for forgiveness. So you have 10 months to talk to your lender and ask for help when it comes to forgiveness. One of the pages of the PPP forgiveness application is a certification page. And I just really want to point out here that this here is that you should not be using the PPP funds for unauthorized purposes, and that you can get hit with fraud when you use it for unauthorized purposes. So just be very careful that you're going to sign off on that. And there's this big paragraph here that I'm not going to read out loud. But basically, you can go up to 30 years to go in jail if you do these types of things incorrectly. You know, we're very moral people, so I'm sure you're not doing this on purpose. And the fine is up to $1 million. It's a bail. It's the price to get out of jail if you are caught, you know, doing fraudulent things. So basically, you put your initials to let the SBA put you in jail. You do this for each of these statements. You put in your initials 7 times. So you're basically telling the SBA, Congress, Treasury Department, and the federal government that you're allowing them to put you in court if you're entering any of this information incorrectly. All right. And we did hear, what if I already spent the PPP money, right? So I'm your doctor. I'm not a doctorate, okay? I'm just a CPA, but here I am gonna fix your problems or your challenges or whatever you want to call it. Solution one here is if you received your PPP fund, right? If you received $10,000 and you already spent $3,000, put that $3,000 back, and then follow step 1, 2, and 3 that I've mentioned in the earlier slide with the piggy bank. Solution 2, if you don't have the cash anymore, right? Then just make sure you document it properly and get your documents in order so that way you can prove that you didn't use the money for a Rolls Royce or jewelry. Solution number 3 is to, I know, it sounds so silly, but ask your lender for the exact documents that you're gonna need to ask for forgiveness. Okay. And then in solution 4, just make sure you allocate your funds appropriately in your accounting system, right? I would think that you have an accounting system or somewhat, I hope it's not just a notebook, but that you have a QuickBooks Online or something like that. And well, I'm gonna just put my shameless plug here. Call your CPA for help to try to make sure that all of the PPP money has been allocated appropriately. And especially if the CPA used to be an auditor like me and help you gather all these documents in order. Okay. So for the word-for-word documentation here on this, of course, you can look up the SBA disaster program on sba.gov/disaster. You can call the SBA, sba.gov/local-assistance. You can find the nearest district office near you, and you can call them, right? They're really helpful people, and it's been fun calling them. Sometimes their phone line is busy, so you're gonna just have to hang up and call back. The treasury.gov website here, there's a red banner at the top. Click on that, and you'll find all the references to the law. And then SBA forgiveness application, I assume that's going to get updated. And then round 2 still has money, and they don't have any plans to extend the PPP application process. So if you don't have your PPP money, then apply as soon as possible, because if the SBA does not receive your PPP application by June 30th, then they will automatically deny you. All right, and I've mentioned this already, PPP forgiveness application is going to come soon. PPP aside, I just want to make everyone really aware that please treat, your self-employment or whatever as a business. In essence, just get all your records, keep that in order, and I can help you organize your receipts, your bank statements, and what's really important to keep as a record. And, with that, you build financial statements so that way you can analyze your business. This is not, you don't just use your financials to try to apply for a loan, but you also use it to analyze in your business. And if you're looking to work with other people, at least you can give them a really broad picture of what your business is like. And then taxes, right? Your taxes here, of course, your taxes uses the financials, and there are many strategies out there to reduce your taxes, especially when you have multiple businesses. There are lots of different ways, of course, this word called tax loophole. We don't want to put you in jail or anything like that, but there are legal ways to save money on your taxes. How can my firm help you? I do have a team. I am not by myself. It would be very difficult for me to do this by myself. But what we try to do is we try to plan out your tax planning and your tax savings. We try to answer your questions, especially when you don't know what you don't know. And at least now you know who to go to. We save you time, time for you to focus on what you really need to focus on in your business, and your information. I know you're overloaded, but at least we're going to target information that you need to know, right? Not the whole general gist of things. Okay, with that, I will give this to corporate payroll. And thank you very much for listening to me. I'm going to try to look at all these questions here so I can brainstorm some good answers. So, all right.
Thank you, Hiromi. Great. I'm going to try and keep my sections short. I know we have a lot of questions. So like Hiromi mentioned, we are working on a report to help you complete the PPP Loan Forgiveness Application. It's still in development, also mainly because the new application is not available that has instructions to go with it. I do want to mention there is a fee for this report, and we are also going to have a consultation. So anyone that's interested in obtaining a report will have a consultation with Hiromi just to go over the report so that she can validate the accuracy, ask you the right questions, and make any necessary adjustments. There are certain things that we would not be able to reflect on the report if we don't have it. So, but she can go over that again. You're also able to use your own other payroll reports, just standard payroll reports that we send to you that have the wages, all the information that you would need. But the information that we will provide to you on the report will be things like she mentioned as far as the PPP, the worksheet section, where it has eligible earnings for over 100 or under 100,000. Also the average full-time employee calculation will also include the salary, hourly wage deduction, and so on. So we're trying to mimic the application as close as possible. But again, it's very important to have that reviewed with a CPA. So that's why we've partnered with her. If you have any specific questions or want to be listed on the, just want to tell me that you are interested in the report, I can reach out to you directly. Just send me over, shoot me an email, or you can call me at call your local branch and just ask for extension 3001, and that way I can add you to the list and we'll reach out to you once it's available. Thank you. Kay, go ahead and take over.
Thank you. So we will open up space for a few questions. Let me go ahead and 1 second. So these were the reports, so I didn't go through the screen as you were talking. And I know Hiromi was answering questions throughout the webinar. So if there was a question that went with the slides, she was able to answer them. But I do know there's a few more. So Hiromi, if you have time just to answer a few.
Sure. I'll try to go over these, and if I go over time, please warn me. I want to make sure that I respect everyone's time on here, but it looks like everyone is very excited to ask questions. Thank you for your participation.
So we're at 11:52 now. Usually we would end at 12, but if you are able to stay for about another 10 minutes, that would be good. And then, you know, if we don't get through all the questions by then, we can just email answers, if anything.
Sure, that's fine.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I might as well just go in order here. If I answer them, then we don't have to go over the same question again. All right, the first one here is, if rules changed, what about health insurance premiums paid before getting PPP funding? If you're gonna, the rule is that PPP funds can be used on expenses incurred and paid during the covered period. So if the premium is really meant for a period before the covered period, it's not covered. It's not an allowable expense. So it needs to be incurred and paid during the covered period. Okay. Next, are we able to give out raises now? Yes, as long as you're paying, and the SBA specifically pointed this one out, if you're going to give raises or hazard pay or anything to the employees, as long as you're paying them less than $100,000 per employee, then you're totally fine. So yes, you can give raises. Does the PPP loan cover disability insurance for employees? I didn't see that specifically on the application, so I'm gonna write that down, disability insurance. That one, I'm not quite sure. It might be part of the employee benefits, but I don't know. Sorry, Rebecca. Is the FTE comparison for full forgiveness now based on average FTE over the 24-week period than as opposed to the 8-week period? That one, the calculation for this is not quite clear. you know, and sorry, Scott, that I'm not quite sure about this one, but all I know is that you need to hire your employees by December 31st, 2020. And that is the vague instruction that I read. Okay. Scott, feel free to send me an email with this so that way I can research further. Okay. All right. Okay. If funds were received prior to the new 24-week period becoming official, are we locked into the 8-week period, or do we need to confirm with the lender? I would confirm with the lender if I were you, Tom. But I did read on the SBA website that every lender should be modifying their covered period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. And so far, I haven't heard a lender who has their forgiveness application ready, because the SBA website's forgiveness application is not even ready themselves. And so I would assume that they're going to modify their conditions. We had given salary increases for the 8-week period and have spent more than the PPP loan. We would now like to reduce everyone's pay back to normal. Can we do that before officially requesting loan forgiveness? Well, if you Kimberly, if you've already spent the PPP loan money, you might as well apply for the loan forgiveness as soon as you can. I don't know if you can get reduced PPP forgiveness if you apply at a later time, but since you've already spent the money, you can really do whatever you want after that. Okay, Kathleen, can you address stipulations for S Corps? I am my only employee of my S Corp. I think I've addressed that, right? In the presentation, you use your 2019 net profit, right? And then you can use your allowable expenses, especially if you have a business use of home. I'm an S Corp also. I'm my only employee, and I have a team, but they're mainly independent contractors. They're other CPAs and stuff. And so I understand how you feel when it comes to an S Corp. Okay, we have used the PPP funds per the 8-week schedule. However, business is still very slow and we are considering layoffs. How would this affect our forgiveness application? You know what, just make sure that you use all of the PPP funds, you know, before you apply for the forgiveness, and then apply for the forgiveness, and you could do whatever you need to do afterwards. But I read that you need to have your forgiveness could be affected if you don't have the same number of employees by December 31st. But there is no instructions on what if you already were approved for the forgiveness before then. I don't know how that's going to affect your forgiveness, right? So just use as much money as you can for the PPP on the PPP funds, and then hopefully it doesn't affect you after you do the layoffs. But of course, there is that bill, right? Remember that bill I showed, that if your business is not at the same level as it was before the pandemic, you're gonna have an excuse. We received EIDL after the PPP. Can we add the EIDL to PPP to use total of both on allowable expenses, or is it required that we repay the EIDL regardless, right? Just make sure the EIDL and the PPP funds are not paying for the same allowable expenses, right? It's just one or the other. No double dipping allowed. It's not like you shouldn't be using. You should use PPP to pay payroll, right? That's why it's called Payroll Protection Program, and then some allowable expenses. And what I've seen is that EIDL, there's way more money in that. So say that one is a 30-year loan. There is no forgiveness for that one. So save the EIDL funds for after the PPP money is once it ran out. Is the $10,000 EIDL grant still deducted from the forgivable amount? Yes, it is. Please list the specific items that be included as payroll costs. You know, I put in the general gist of it in that one slide. So let me see if I can answer this. Pay, yes. 401k match, only for the employees. FICA, only, no, not the FICA, not the employer's portion of the FICA. Employee health insurance, yes. For the employees, yes. Please specify. And how do we capture this in corporate payroll? And as you see, the application has those specific items on there.
I also want to add your federal unemployment tax FUTA is not included in your payroll cost. The tax withholding liabilities report that you get does have those separate taxes listed out for you, so you'll be able to pull out which are valid payroll costs. So what does not count would be the employer FICA, employer FUTA, and also
Perfect.
workers' comp.
Perfect. It is 12 o'clock, so if all you busy business owners are out there and you have to go somewhere at 12 o'clock, go ahead and we'll give you the recording afterwards. But as of now, I still have time, and I'll try to go through more of these questions, okay? If you elect the 24-week period but have spent all the funds, PPP funds earlier, say week 10, can you apply for forgiveness earlier? Yes, as long as your lender is ready for you to apply for that PPP forgiveness, you can go ahead and apply as soon as you are ready. I did not receive an EIDL, only PPP, but got a note from the SBA that they would like to move ahead with my EIDL. How does that affect the amount of forgiveness I can get from the PPP? And as you know, I explained it on that slide earlier, and watch the recording again, and let me know if you have any more questions after that. But can EIDL be used for subscriptions, internet communications, and marketing expenses? Yes, you can use it for all of those things. They sound like working capital. So yeah, it's all good. Good question. Does payroll costs include payroll taxes? If so, which taxes specifically does it include? Okay, and that one I think we've addressed. Do rent costs include CAM charges? CAM charges. I don't think so. But send me an email on that one so I can do my research. Okay, CAM charges. Okay. Next, we had 2 employees retire right at the beginning of the PPP loan. Will that be okay as far as the forgiveness goes? Yeah, I think so, because it wasn't in your power, really. So just make sure you have the documentation for that. So you should be okay. We have also had employees leave that we have not replaced, wondering how that will affect us. And, if they left and you keep the proper documentation, you should be okay. You can replace these employees with other people, human bodies and alive. And then you should be okay with that too. But yeah, just keep the proper documentations for that. We had employees who did not work and filed for unemployment benefits. We wanted them to report to work, but they stated they could not. We did not pay them during this time unless they elected to use PTO. We have appealed their unemployment benefits, but have not received a response back. Will this affect us? You're doing the best you can, to do the right thing. And that's the most important part. It's really on the employee on that. So you've tried your best, and no, I think you could only go so far as that, and then hear back from the DOL. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure a lot of people, you're not the only one in this right now. Can salary be higher than it was in 2019? You did not address this through your slide. How much higher? You can give yourself a raise. Yes, you can give yourself a salary higher than in 2019 for W-2, right? If you have a W-2, yes, you can increase your salary because you could use a third-party report. But as I mentioned, for self-employed people, you will be using your 2019 tax return, and that was very clearly stated on the instructions on that. So 2019 net profit for self-employed people who are using Schedule C, and for partnership K1. There is no mention of using any other number other than that. Okay. How do you calculate headcount if it varied over the PPP period? Right, this is very confusing. So I would say that you're going to have to depend on the calculators that is provided by corporate payroll, and then we'll have to take a look into the calculations of that. I think it's just too complicated to discuss over verbal. And as you see, with the number of hours divided by 40 hours, I was kind of struck by that. So that's something that needs to be clearer as we go along with this process. So sorry. Can you force your employees to use their vacation time during the PPP period because there's no work to do? That is, you're keeping the payroll going, but they're not working and using accumulated leave? Or are the employees entitled to continue to be paid whether working or not and do not have to use leave? That one's really more like an ethical issue, right? I think the employees would be disgruntled if they have to use PTO, especially if there's still holidays at the end of the year, you know, Thanksgiving and Christmas. And this is free money from the government, PPP money. And they're really just hoping that you would use this to keep the employees on your payroll and not have them use the PTO, right?
Do you mind if I piggyback off of that? That question definitely sounded like a good question for human resources. And so right now, I think there's still time. We have about 13 more days left. We are offering a free trial to the Corporate Payroll Services HR Support Center. So through the HR Support Center with questions like that, as far as paying paid sick leave and stuff like that, you'd be able to speak directly with a human resource professional as well as paralegals, so that you would be able to get a complete and legal answer when it comes to that. And again, we do have a free trial of that up until July. So if you want to write this down, if you email hrhelp@corepay.com, you can get them to sign you up for that. And you can ask all these questions and more to an HR professional, and they'll be able to give you answers based on federal, also based on the state that you live in, and also based on your industry. So thank you.
Awesome. That's really good. Thanks. Oh, and I do want to mention that even if you're receiving the PPP fund, you can use the FFCRA tax credit, the Family First Response Act. You know, if there was an employee who was sick, you can use the sick credits that we had in a webinar, the first webinar I did with corporate payroll. And then if you have a family member or a relative that you have to take care of because their care center was closed, or if you have children and their school was closed, there's also tax credits for that you can use. But of course, don't use the PPP funds to pay them and get the tax credit. No, just don't do that. Okay. What if you pay Safe Harbor 401k contribution at the end of the year? Ooh, that one. I'll have to research on that one. Safe Harbor 401k. Okay. Sorry, I can't answer that right now. When I originally applied, I used the total number of employees on the application, not based on the hours. How will that be assessed for forgiveness? My original number is somewhat higher than it should have been, since several employees were part-time employees. Also, do all part-timers count as 0.5, or should we do the exact calculation based on the hours equivalency? You know, when this was first explained, it was first explained that part-timers were considered one as a headcount. But when I looked at the forgiveness application, it was so odd because now their hours is considered 0.5. So based on the forgiveness application, it looked like it was based off of 0.5. We'll have to go through the calculations together to see how that's really going to affect you, right? And what your results are going to be.
That is correct, Hiromi. The application is now saying 0.5 or the exact calculation under 1.
How does this work in a partnership where all partners receive W-2 wages along with non-partner employees? Ooh, why would a partnership pay themselves W-2 wages? That's like my question. In a partnership, I guess it depends on what kind of entity that you have, right? So if you have an S Corp and you have partners in the S Corp, then yes, you would pay yourself W-2 wages. But if you're in a partnership and it's an LLC disregarded entity, that doesn't, please send me your question. I need to know more information about this. Because you shouldn't be paying yourself a W-2 wage and reporting self-employment income in your tax return, because then it sounds like to me that you're paying double taxes. You said insurance is not part of the forgiveness. Yes, I did. It's not included in the allowable expenses. Do I now need to wait for the 24-week period to be over before applying for forgiveness? No, you don't. You can apply whenever the lender is ready. Okay, to clarify my previous question, I would like to incentivize my employee and pay her more than I paid her in 2019. Of course, the PPP amount was based on her 2019 salary. I have enough money to pay her more than I did in 2019. Oh, okay, it's for your employee. Yes, you may, as long as the employee is going to earn less than $100,000 per year. Yes, you can, especially when the employee is not the owner of your company and you're paying them a W-2 wage. So you should be okay. Thanks for the clarification. When will the CPS report be available and how much will it cost?
We're still waiting for the application, the updated application, to be released along with the instructions. So the report, we are still working on it based on what we believe the changes are going to be, but it's not available yet. So I don't have a time. I apologize. And unfortunately, I don't have a cost right now. I can provide, if you want to send me a specific email, I can reply to you once we have the final information. And I'll put my email in the chat real quick. Thank you.
To clarify my question, business is a partnership, but all partners take a W-2 salary. We included those 2019 salaries in PPP application, assuming we would include them in use of PPP funds. Okay. I would have to look at your tax return to see how this is being reported, to really clarify this. But if you are, and if you have to pay yourself a W-2 salary, I would assume that your entity is either an S Corp or some type of corporation for you to have to do that. And so the W-2 wages, then you would just use the corporate payroll, report. Okay, I saw this question earlier, the 401k safe harbor. That one I have to research, so I put that on my things to do. Oh, thank you. Thank you for staying, Rena. Question regarding figuring out S Corp owners 2019 compensation. Line 1 of the W-2 includes S Corp insurance payments. Should we be using line 3 of the W-2 instead, since we are adding health insurance payments separately for PPP purposes? What I've read in the rules is that owners, if you're an employee, if you're an owner employee, what I have read is that if you're contributing to an owner's health insurance, that's not going to be counted for allowable expense. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, if you read a rule that's different, but that's what I saw. Will CPS provide payroll totals for a specific period?
You're always able to get additional reports either online or call your payroll specialist. So based on your covered period, so if you're looking for reports on your covered period, you want to provide us with the check dates that include those covered periods. So your covered period is probably going to reflect align with the pay period start and end date. But the reports that will provide you always give us the check dates that you want. So just be careful with that. So when you're calling it in, say I would like reports for this check date range instead of giving us the exact the covered period of your loan.
Okay. Last question here, and then we'll end this. We pay monthly to the person that we bought the company from years ago. When we write the checks, it is for retirement. So we pay monthly retirement to him, but he's not on payroll. Not sure if he can be part of the forgiveness. I'm not sure about that one. I don't know if he's on the corporate payroll report or whatnot. So that's something that if you can send me that question, I will go ahead and research. Oh, he's not on the report? Okay, Jason, thank you for clarifying that. No, I honestly don't think he could be included. If a full-time employee spends, okay, for real, this is the last one now. If a full-time employee spends slightly less than 40 hours, do I still count them as full-time? You know, on the calculations that I saw, it's really by a percentage now. So if it's 35 hours divided by 40, then you would put in that percentage in that column there. So let's just follow the calculation that the forgiveness application has. It didn't really match with the rules that we found out about earlier, but it is what it is now. Okay.
Just to follow up, my understanding of full-time is anyone that works 40 or more hours would have a 1 for average FTE. So if they work less than 40 hours, they would not be counted as full-time. No, they're looking at 40 hours or more for full-time hours.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. So I still have Hiromi's information up here. So if you have any more questions, you can send that over to info@taxproplan.com. And then you also have Effort's information if you have any questions that are corporate payroll service related. And finally, again, if you have any more questions that are HR related, or if you need any type of templates or handbooks or things like that to help get you through all of this and to have legal answers and specific answers to your state and industry, hrhelp@corpay.com. They can sign you up for the remainder of the free trial that we're having this month. And again, you'll have access to hundreds of HR professionals and legal professionals throughout the nation. So again, thank you guys for joining. I will be sending out a recording of this webinar later today or early tomorrow morning. And I hope you guys all have a good rest of your day. And thank you so much again, Hiromi, for hosting with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Have a good day.
Thank you. You guys all have a good day as well. Bye.
Bye-bye.